The leather jacket hit the floor with a dull thud, and in that moment, the rowdy Friday night chatter of O'Malley's bar died like someone had pulled the plug on reality itself. What started as a careless accident, a biker's studded sleeve catching on a woman's shirt as he squeezed past her bar stool, had just revealed something that made even the hardest men in that room forget how to breathe. Maria Santos hadn't meant to be there that night. The single mother of two had stopped in only because her car had broken down 3 blocks away, and she needed to use a phone to call a tow truck. She'd been clutching her cardigan closed with one hand, trying to make herself invisible in a room full of loud voices and beer-soaked laughter, when it happened. The biker, a mountain of a man named Jake with a gray beard and arms like tree trunks, had turned too quickly from the bar, his jacket festooned with chains and studs. One of those studs caught the thin fabric of her shirt and tore it straight down the shoulder, exposing her back. Jake had spun around immediately, apology already forming on his lips, but the words never came. Instead, his weathered face went pale. Behind him, his buddies, 4 other bikers who'd been shooting pool and trading stories about the open road, stopped mid-sentence. The bartender, a Vietnam vet named Chuck who'd seen just about everything in his 63 years, set down the glass he'd been drying and simply stared. Maria felt the draft on her skin and realized with horror what had happened. She tried to pull the torn fabric together, her face flushing crimson with embarrassment, but it was too late. Everyone had seen it, not her skin. They'd barely noticed that. What froze them all in place was the tattoo that covered her entire back. An intricate, unmistakable United States Marine Corps emblem, surrounded by names. Dozens of them, each one inscribed in careful script, forming a memorial that no one could look away from. "Ma'am," Jake's voice came out rough, almost broken. This man who'd spent 30 years riding with outlaw motorcycle clubs, who had his own share of scars and stories, stood there with his hands shaking. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. Please, take my jacket." He was already shrugging out of it, but Maria shook her head quickly, tears springing to her eyes. This was exactly what she'd been trying to avoid. The stares, the questions, the weight of other people's emotions when they realized what those names meant. "It's fine," she whispered, still trying to hold her torn shirt together. "I just need to make a phone call and go." "Those names," said a voice from the back corner. An older man stood up slowly from his booth, and Maria recognized the bearing immediately, the straight back, the measured movements. "Former military, no question. Those are Marines." It wasn't a question, but Maria nodded anyway. Her hands were trembling now, and she hated that everyone was looking at her, hated that this moment was happening at all. "My unit," she said softly. "Afghanistan, 2011. The silence that followed was different from the first one. This wasn't shock anymore, it was reverence. And something else. Recognition. Understanding. Grief. Chuck came around from behind the bar, moving slowly. He reached for a button-down shirt that hung on a hook by the door, his spare, the one he kept for when things got messy during bar fights. "Here," he said gently. "Let's get you somewhere private so you can change." But before Maria could take it, another voice spoke up. This one belonged to a younger guy in a booth by the window, mid-30s, wearing a baseball cap and nursing a beer. "Thompson," he said, reading one of the names visible on her back. "Sergeant Michael Thompson. I knew him. He was my drill instructor at Paris Island. Before he deployed." Maria's breath caught. She turned slowly to look at the young man, whose eyes were now bright with unshed tears. "You knew Mike?" "Yes, ma'am. He was the toughest son of a gun I ever met, and the best Marine I ever knew. He wrote me a letter once, after I graduated. Told me to keep my head down and my powder dry." The young man stood up, his voice thick. "I didn't know he didn't make it home." "Ambush," Maria said quietly. 11 of us went out that morning. 4 of us came back." Her voice broke on the last word, and she pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to hold back the wave of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. Jake still stood there holding his jacket, and now he stepped forward again, his own eyes red. "Ma'am, please, take it, and let me buy you a drink. Or coffee, or whatever you need." He paused, and his voice dropped to almost a whisper. "My son was a Marine. Iraq, 2007. He didn't come home either." The words hung in the air like a bridge suddenly appearing across an impossible chasm. Maria looked at this big, rough biker with his gray beard and worn leather, and saw past all of it to the father beneath. The man who carried his own unbearable weight, his own names written not on his skin but on his heart. "I'm so sorry," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "Me too," Jake replied. "Every damn day." Something shifted in the room then. The bartender, Chuck, cleared his throat. "My brother was Marines," he said. "Made it back from Vietnam, but he wasn't the same. Lost him to his demons in '89. He held up the shirt again. "Please, let me help." One by one, others in the bar began to speak up. The woman shooting pool in the back corner said her uncle had been Navy, killed in the Gulf War. A man at the bar mentioned his cousin, Army, who'd stepped on an IED in Kandahar. Another talked about his grandfather, who'd stormed the beaches at Normandy and lived to be 92, but never stopped having nightmares about the men he'd left behind in France. Each story poured out like water from a cracked dam, and Maria stood in the center of it all, overwhelmed and strangely comforted at the same time. These weren't just strangers staring at her anymore. They were people who understood. People who carried their own scars, visible and invisible. Finally, she let Chuck guide her to the back office, where she changed into his spare shirt. It smelled like cigarette smoke and dish soap, and it was 3 sizes too big, but it felt like kindness. When she emerged, Jake was waiting with his jacket anyway. "Just in case you get cold," he said gruffly. "And your car?" Chuck told me it broke down. "Where is it?" 3 blocks north, Maria admitted. "I was going to call a tow truck." "Forget the tow truck," Jake gestured to his friends. "We'll take a look at it. These boys can fix anything with an engine." "I can't ask you to do that," Maria protested. "You're not asking. We're offering." Jake's expression softened. "My boy, Daniel," his name was Daniel, he used to talk about his unit like they were family. Said they'd do anything for each other. That they were brothers and sisters in a way civilians could never understand. He paused. "You carried your family on your back, ma'am. Literally. That's the kind of honor I haven't seen in a long time. Let us help you, please." Maria felt tears streaming down her face now, and she didn't bother to wipe them away. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." What happened next would become the story that everyone in O'Malley's bar would tell for years to come. Jake and his biker friends escorted Maria to her broken-down sedan, and within 30 minutes, they diagnosed the problem, a dead battery and a loose connection. One of them had jumper cables. Another had tools. Within an hour, her car was running again, purring like it was fresh off the lot. But that wasn't the end of it. While they worked on the car, the young man from the bar, his name was Marcus, and he'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan himself, sat with Maria and told her everything he remembered about Sergeant Thompson. The jokes Mike used to tell. The way he'd pushed his recruits hard because he cared about keeping them alive. The letter he'd sent that Marcus still kept in a box at home. "He saved my life," Marcus said quietly. "Not literally, but the discipline he taught me, the mindset, that's what got me through some bad situations overseas. I owe him everything." He looked at Maria intently. "Can I ask you something? Why the tattoo? Why carry them like that?" Maria was quiet for a long moment, watching Jake and his friends work on her car under the streetlight. "Because they carried me," she finally said. "When the ambush happened, when everything went to hell, they formed a wall around the wounded. They gave their lives so that 4 of us could make it out. I was one of those 4. She touched her shoulder, where the tattoo began. "I got this so I would never forget. So they would always be with me. So that every day, when I wake up and put on my uniform, I'm a VA counselor now, I remember why I do this work. Why I help other veterans." Marcus nodded slowly, wiping his eyes. "They'd be proud of you." "I hope so," Maria whispered. By the time her car was fixed, a small crowd had gathered. Chuck had closed the bar early and brought out coffee and sandwiches for everyone. People shared more stories. About loved ones lost, about service and sacrifice, about the invisible threads that connected all of them despite their different backgrounds and lives. Jake, standing beside Maria as she prepared to drive home, pulled something from his pocket. It was a patch, a Marine Corps emblem, worn and faded. "This was Daniel's," he said. "I've carried it for 18 years. I want you to have it." "I can't take that," Maria protested immediately. "Yes, You can. Jake's voice was firm but gentle. Because you'll understand what it means. And because I think Daniel would want one of his sister Marines to have it. You remind me of him. That same strength, that same honor. He pressed it into her hand. Take it. Add it to your memorial, or keep it separate. But take it. Maria closed her fingers around the patch, feeling the weight of it. Not the physical weight, but the weight of trust, of connection, of one grieving father reaching across the void to touch another warrior's soul. I'll treasure it, she promised. Thank you, for everything. As she drove away that night, her rearview mirror showed the group still standing together under the streetlight. Bikers and veterans, bartenders and strangers, all bound together by the stories they'd shared and the recognition that pain, when shared, becomes a little more bearable. Jake raised his hand in a salute, and Maria returned it, tears streaming down her face once more. She didn't know that Chuck would frame a photo he'd taken that night and hang it behind the bar with a sign that read, "We honor those who served." She didn't know that Marcus would visit Mike Thompson's grave the next week and leave flowers. She didn't know that Jake would start a support group for Gold Star families, or that it would grow to help hundreds of grieving parents and siblings. All she knew, as she drove through the dark streets toward home and her sleeping children, was that sometimes accidents reveal exactly what needs to be seen. That sometimes a torn shirt can tear down walls. And that the memorial she carried on her back wasn't just for the names written there, it was a reminder that we all carry each other, in ways seen and unseen, and that humanity's greatest strength lies in our willingness to honor that burden together. The tattoo would remain hidden most days, covered by shirts and professional attire. But the connection forged that night in O'Malley's bar would last forever. A reminder that we're never as alone as we think, and that sometimes the most unexpected moments of grace come from the most unexpected places.